It is absolutely thrilling to be able to host the Alvin and Violet Memorial Fund Rabbi in Residence, Scholar in Residence program together again in person. This is the very first time that we're doing this in almost 2 years. And so I want to take a moment just to appreciate the fact that the courtyard, the synagogue, services, the purpose of it all is for us to learn together and grow together. And I think we have the best scholar to initiate that process once again. Tammi J. Schneider is the Danforth Professor of Religion at Claremont Graduate University. Her research draws together the very fields of archaeology, Assyriology, and biblical studies in an effort to understand the ancient Near East, especially the interactions among various peoples. She teaches ancient Near Eastern history, literature, archaeology, and religion, and women in the Hebrew Bible. Schneider received her PhD in ancient history from the University of Pennsylvania. Throughout her career, Schneider has taught and lectured at the University of Minnesota, University of Pennsylvania, Greats College, University of Judaism, and CGU. In addition to teaching, Schneider also has professional excavation and museum experience. Her books include Judges in the Great Olam series, Sarah, Mother of Nations, Mothers of Promise, Women in the Book of Genesis, and An Introduction to Ancient Near Eastern Religion. She is president of the Pacific Coast region of the Society of Biblical Literature. Schneider has worked on numerous archaeological excavations in Israel, and she's the head of the educational program at the Tel Akko Excavations, where she excavates every year with students from CGU and the Claremont colleges. On a personal note, Pirkei Avot teaches us that each of us is supposed to find for themselves a teacher. And as a child, you just kind of receive teachers and go through the process year after year after year. And I have found it to be so meaningful to choose teachers. And I have to admit that in Claremont Graduate University and in Professor Schneider, I chose a really, really great one. She is, most importantly, although I noticed it's absent from her biography, she's in charge of my dissertation. She's the advisor in my dissertation process. I'm sure that'll be added after this Scholar in Residence experience. And also I'll add that she is a tremendously loyal Vikings fan. It is our pleasure to welcome to this bima Professor Tammi Schneider.
So I'm a little verklempt. I'm going to try and do this without my sunglasses, but I have, weak eyes. All right, so I thought I would be really excited to be here, which I am, because he talks about you. So I know you qua congregation, right? But I kind of feel like I have to throw this out because your rabbi, my student, likened today's Torah portion to eating ice cream out of Mickey Mouse ears at Disneyland. I can't compete with that. And then your cantor actually set Ahava Rabbah to Disneyland songs. So I have a feeling that when I go walk with the dean tomorrow morning and tell her that, she'll just sign your dissertation because we're big Disney fans. Like, I have a magic key. So it's amazing to be here. Yesterday, I spoke to a nursing home, and it was the first time that I had spoken in front of like a live audience since January of 2020. So I'm a little rusty, but bear with me because now that you know that I can throw this out after the Mickey Mouse thing, we're good. All right, so my mother, when I was a kid, always told my siblings and I that she loved us all the same. We both believed her and did not, sometimes knowing that she loved one of our siblings more and sometimes knowing that we were the beloved child. It depended on what we had done that day. Once, when I was already in graduate school and my brother was in his later years of college, we were play fighting, and I said, "It isn't fair, you love him more than you love me." And he said, "It isn't fair, you love her more than you love me." And our mother looked at us and she said, "You're both wrong. I love your other sister the most," and walked out of the room. And we looked at her and we're like, "You can't say that." And she said, "I can say whatever I want. I'm the mother." You can't say that. So, after having heard today's Torah portion, you know why I broach this subject and I tell this story today. Toldot claims, quote, "Now Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game, and Rebekah loved Jacob." Genesis 25:28. Because of that line, Rebekah has often been accused of not loving Esau and a whole series of other issues. And just FYI, what he didn't add is, I'm sort of one of those radical feminist biblical scholars that aren't there. There's not a lot of us. So we've got chips. Anyway, so because of that line, Rebekah is often accused of a whole series of things. So I struggled writing this today because there are so many pieces to it, and I was trying to not go over my time limit. I realize I can do that after services, which is a pitch for staying for the study session. Today I'm going to focus on Rebekah because I love her, and I have a soft spot for Esau. To save focus, I'm going to pay attention to today's Torah portion as closely as possible. I'm going to investigate a bit more carefully the relationship between Rebekah and Esau to show that Rebekah's actions depict her as a devotee of the Israelite deity and a mother who will take extreme actions to save her children. It also means, and since in Judaism actions trump belief, it's hard for me to see Rebekah any other way. And let me just say, I don't refer to God when I'm talking about the Bible because everyone has their own idea of who and what God is, and I don't want to trample on anyone's notion of the divine, so I say the Israelite deity or the deity so that God can stay safe. So, where a story begins and ends shapes a story, as our rabbi already taught us, so I can go home. Supposedly, everything in Torah is known to everything else in Torah. The reality is that in terms of narrative, that does not help us understand the construction of a story. For Torah, and especially for a Jewish reading, most of us cannot remember the first time we heard the story. And while we do see it as a narrative, the reality is that it was broken up for us in weekly sections, forcing us to ruminate on the discrete bites while knowing that since we begin and end reading the Torah on the same day, we are always in the middle of the story, right? We never finish the book, which if you're a Hebrew Bible scholar is great because we have a holiday that celebrates me keeping my job. So, while I want to focus on today's parsha specifically, because I think doing that adds some interesting nuances to the story, I will highlight some aspects about Rebekah first so that you see how I think of her and or you learn to understand her the right way. In doing so, I hope to show that today's story highlights something all of us can understand. Family dynamics are hard. First, a quick survey of Rebekah. When scholars get past labeling her a trickster, they tend to suggest she only cares about one of her children, that she is an obedient vessel or a scheming wife. Rebekah is similar to Sarah in that they are both identified as attractive, have fertility problems, moved to Canaan from elsewhere, are identified as sisters to their husbands rather than wives at least once in the story, and bear heirs to the deity's promise. Differences concern their family of origin, the number of children they have, and the role of other women around them. I think of Rebekah as a bit of a balabusta, and I'll unpack that in a minute if you don't know what a balabusta is, but in a good way. She is always moving around quickly, getting stuff done, taking care of everything, from when we first meet her at the well in Padan Aram, where she is busy doing things and running home, to throughout the rest of today's story. Rebekah's depictions focus on her family. Her family tree is full of the right people. She may embody two of the three lines of Terah, with Abraham and Isaac being that third line, through Nahor, her great-grandfather, and her grandmother, Milcah. Her birth is announced following the sacrifice of Isaac and before the death of Sarah in Genesis 22:20. Her brother is not only relevant in that he asks her if she wants to be married, but also sets up the story for the next generation, which will be next week. She is also described as chosen by the Israelite deity. Rebekah's actions depict her as one of the more active women in Genesis. As noted previously, she's a balabusta, which carries both positive and negative connotations. The Yiddish term historically has the positive connotation of an extremely competent and self-assured homemaker. Just like in Padanaram and in this week's portion, she is busy making sure stuff gets done, making Isaac's favorite meal, getting Esau's clothes on Jacob, making sure she has all the right ingredients. Yet at the same time, the Yiddish word has come to represent a feeling of being chained to the stove and denied opportunities outside the home. The traditional role of the balabusta is essentially that of the wife in Judaism. That is, she must manage the home in both practical terms, housekeeping duties such as cooking, cleaning, and maintaining the household finances, which we always got to be in charge of, and spiritual ones, as in facilitating shalom bayit, the Jewish religious concept of general domestic harmony and good relations between husband and wife, and I will add, as we'll discuss, children. Finally, due in part to the coincidental similarity of the Yiddish word, and I'm not making this next part up, and I'm not trying to use naughty language. I was just looking up a few examples of balabusta, and I found this, and my head exploded. So, I'm not making this up. Okay, so, in part, due to the coincidental similarity of the Yiddish word to the English colloquialism ballbuster, defined as a person who is relentlessly aggressive, intimidating, or domineering, balabusta, as used by English speakers, has taken on the connotation of assertiveness or bossiness. I'm not even making this up. So too, Rebecca is often accused of being manipulative, secretive, trickster, leading her sweet Jacob astray to trick her innocent husband. Now let's turn to today's text. The parsha begins in Genesis 25:19, and is named Toldot because the first line begins, Ela Toldot, these are the generations of Isaac, son of Abraham. While the focus is on the line of Isaac, including both Esau and Jacob, the parsha ends with the focus on Esau, not Jacob. It easily could have ended at the end of line 5 rather than 9, but it does not. Thus, one might argue that the focus of the chapter might be on how and why Esau ended the line from the Jewish perspective. Unlike Abraham, without being told or asked, Isaac prays for his wife, who we already learn he loves. She has twins, and the twins are already struggling with each other in the womb. Rebecca, though newish to Canaan, turns to the Israelite deity and seeks counsel with or inquires. It's the verb darash. Let's be clear, this is highly unusual. The Israelite deity does not talk to women. And I hear some of you thinking, but at the end of chapter 18, line 15, there is. But if you read Torah.com, the week before your rabbi's article, I argue, and if I can convince the guys at Torah.com that it's actually Abraham speaking to her, I'm right. So, not only does she inquire Darash the deity, but she receives a response which explains what is going to happen with her son's futures. We also read immediately that Isaac loves Esau because he is a skilled hunter, and apparently Isaac is quite the carnivore, which is slightly odd considering his younger days with his dad. You might think he would at least become a vegetarian. But Rebecca favors Jacob. It is interesting to read the new JPS translation because they translate favor when the Hebrew claims ohev, more often than not translated as love. In this case, I would argue that, though traditionally only Rebecca is accused of bad parenting rather than Isaac, the reality is that both have a favorite. Isaac's favorite is labeled first, and for a reason. Is Rebecca's favoritism because Isaac so clearly favors Esau? Is she trying to even the playing field? Esau is castigated by most commentators, and our rabbi this morning, because, not for this reason though, because in the next scene, he sells his birthright for a bowl of stew, suggesting his birthright does not matter to him. The text claims in Genesis 25, 29, and 30 that he is not hungry, but faint. Many scholars suggest something is innately wrong. This means something is innately wrong not only with Esau for being hungry, but this outdoor hunting way of life. Yet elsewhere in the biblical text, those who are weary from hunger are doing something important, and those who do not care for them are the problems. For example, in Judges, Gideon's troops are in the same state as Esau after having gathered troops, fought a battle, and pursued the enemy leaders. Others who are faint and weary and deserving of the reader's sympathy are King David when his entourage leaves during the revolt by Absalom. and the Israelites, referencing the attack by the Amalekites when Israel is in this state in Deuteronomy. So, should we write off Esau's situation so lightly, and does it suggest he does not care what he is selling for food? What few actually do question is Jacob, who would withhold food from his brother who's about to faint. It is not clear where the kids are when Isaac does something in front of the king of Gerar, making it clear to them that Isaac and Rebekah are married, not siblings. It's usually translated fondling, but it's from the word Isaac, right? They're playing. When we end our time in Gerar, Esau is 40 years old and marries women who his parents don't like. I did that. The text here does not explain why they do not like his wives. It's okay, they get along now. Just that it was a source of bitterness. But later, they claim there is no way Jacob is marrying a Hittite, suggesting their Hittiteness is the problem. Note, if one jumped from Genesis 26:35 to Genesis 27:46, the narrative would make sense. It would jump from not liking Esau's wives to sending Jacob away so that he does not marry a Hittite. Esau would not be mad at Jacob, and the narrative would make sense. But that is not what happens. Instead, Isaac decides to offer Esau his innermost blessing. The blessing he is planning to offer Esau sounds sort of like it would undo what the deity told Rebekah was going to happen in the future. So the question is, does Rebekah take action to protect her husband from destroying the deity's directive from coming true? Or does she just want the kid she favors to get the blessing? Again, commentators love to pick on Rebekah about this, but the reality is, what was Isaac thinking? And heartbreakingly enough for Esau, after Isaac gives the blessing to Jacob, Esau asks, "Why have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Right? Isn't there something for me? The answer clearly is not really so much. But what that means is that the intention was to bless Esau with everything and leave nothing for Jacob. How in the world would that be okay? So while my heart breaks for Esau, the reality is that Isaac, despite the sale of the birthright earlier in their lives, was seemingly trying to undermine it with this blessing. But I'm going to undermine that when we have the conversation later, because if there's 2 Jews, 3 opinions, I get 2 of them today. So I want to highlight a few things often overlooked in this segment. Rebekah, the Balabusta, knows Isaac's favorite stew and makes it. When Jacob fears what will happen to him if his father notices, Rebekah is prepared to take it upon herself. Even though Esau is married and seemingly no longer living with them, Rebekah has his clothes in her house. Technically, house, which is weird, but she keeps his clothes, right? He's married and living somewhere else, but she keeps his clothes at home. I would do that. I suggest the reality of Rebekah's love for Esau is best revealed next. Esau is so angry he is going to kill his brother. The text is a tad confused as it suggests Isaac has died, which then happens again, so things are a bit mangled in terms of the timeline. Rebekah tells Jacob to leave, let me not lose both of you in one day. Most assume that if Esau kills Jacob, then he will be killed also, because that's law. While I think that is probably correct, what she argues is that she does not want to lose them both. She actually doesn't want to lose either of them. They may not get along, and she may have to arrange things so that Isaac does not undermine the deity's plan, but she does not want to lose the son. Note, too, that she would rather spend all her days with her less loved son, knowing that both of them were alive. Esau, who, as our rabbi noted, never seems to get things right, realizes after Jacob leaves that his wives really are bothering his parents. This parsha ends with Esau trying to make things right, at least with his father, by marrying another woman. Who does he choose? His cousin, the daughter of Uncle Ishmael. As I noted earlier, this week's parsha, entitled The Generations of Isaac, ends with Esau's third marriage. I've noted elsewhere that in the book of Genesis, the role of women as mothers is more important than their role as wives. All the patriarchs have more than one son, and the mother is key in deciding who inherits the promise from the deity. In this case, both Esau's mother and wives signify that he is not the correct one to inherit the deity's promise. Does this mean Rebekah is wrong to advocate for Jacob when the deity told her to do so? Does it mean Isaac is wrong to advocate for Esau because he loves him more? Does this parsha teach us categorically what to do, or does it highlight the difficulty in being a wife a husband, a mother, a father, and a brother, and the many angles for which one can view all those dynamics. Shabbat Shalom, and hopefully we can talk about this more later.
Yasher Koach, Tammi. We look forward to learning with you more over lunch.